Greetings and welcome. I am JustaVOR, bringing you what I hope is constructive information on what the system of white supremacy, racism, is and how it works, as well as what can be done to replace it with the system of justice. Donald Trump indicted. Racial white sacrifice confusion? You may be aware that on April 4th, 2023, on the 55th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., former U.S. President Donald Trump was federally indicted on 34 felony counts related to falsifying business records in connection with alleged hush money paid to keep quiet an extramarital affair. A few questions come to mind. With so many scandals involving former and sitting presidents of the so-called United States that could have and or should have resulted in criminal charges, why Donald Trump? Why now? Would these charges have come about if he were not running for a second term as president? What role does the global system of white supremacy play in this situation? On this channel, we have concluded that the terms racism and white supremacy are synonymous and interchangeable, having the same definition, which is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and who are dedicated to the mistreatment and subjugation of all those they have classified as not white. According to the Counter-Racist Code, this matter will fall under Area 6 of the 9 major areas of people's activity, Area 6 being politics. This video is not made in support of or against any particular political party. According to the code, politics is simply relationships between people. This is the perspective through which we will approach this subject. In our previous video entitled Primary Tactics Suspected Racists Use According to the Code, we noted one of the 6 primary tactics used by white supremacists to maintain the system of white supremacy as racial white sacrifice confusion. In this video, we ask and seek to answer the following question: is Donald Trump being used as a white sacrifice? According to the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, a counter-racist code, as written by Mr. Neely Jr., racial white sacrifice confusion is a codified term that applies when the white supremacist racists speak and or act to dominate and mistreat non-white people by doing great harm to themselves and or allowing others to do great harm to white people. The white supremacists sometimes do this in order to cause non-white people to believe that white supremacy does not exist, and or in order to cause non-white people to believe that racism is not a serious problem, except for the few who have chosen to make it so. Is this what we are seeing with Donald Trump? Of course, he is claiming that he is being mistreated and that great harm is being done to him.
And now this massive election interference at a scale never seen before in our country, beginning with the radical left, George Soros-backed prosecutor Alvin Bragg of New York, who campaigned on the fact that he would get President Trump. I'm going to get him. This is a guy campaigning.
Trump spent much of his time during this speech mentioning how he thinks it is unjust that he is being targeted by members of the Democratic Party and what he alludes to as nothing more than an effort to prevent his 2024 presidential run. If you are aware of how politics work, particularly politics in the so-called United States, you can see the many contradictions from either party when it comes to calling out perceived wrongdoings of opposing parties while ignoring similar or the same type of actions from members of their own party. This goes both ways. But why is it that those bringing forth the cases, civil or criminal, against Trump appear to be people classified as black?
And in the wings, they've got a local racist Democrat district attorney in Atlanta who is doing everything in her power to indict me over an absolutely perfect phone call, even more perfect than the one I made with the president of Ukraine.
When non-white people suspect a white person of practicing racism, white people and their confused victims have all sorts of deceptive tactics to confuse or intimidate non-white people from voicing their suspicions. Donald Trump suspected white supremacist, calls Fani Willis, the Fulton County District Attorney out of Atlanta, non-white, black, female victim of racism, a racist. How can a non-white person, a victim of racism, be a racist in a system of white supremacy? Notice how no one is telling Mr. Trump that he is a racist for calling Fani Willis a racist. But when a victim of racism suspects a white person of practicing white supremacy, the victim is accused of being a racist. This strategy of playing the victim causes confusion and is to be expected.
Lastly, I'm under investigation. This time a civil investigation by another racist in reverse, who also campaigned on, "I will get Trump. I will get him." This was her campaign. Never ran for office. "I will get him." Her name is Letitia James.
What is a racist in reverse? Is Donald Trump accusing Letitia James of being a so-called reverse racist? What is reverse racism? This reminds me of when racist suspects only want to admit to being a racist or that racism even exists only when they also attempt to call a non-white person a racist.
I want to just say that I feel I am a racist, but every black that calls Whitey a Whitey is also a racist.
Mr. Trump is acting like these black classified victims of racism don't have white people to answer to if they attempt to unjustly use their position in government. Even white people have to answer to other white people if they are not practicing racism correctly. So it is difficult to see these victims of white supremacy being able to use their given authority to target one of the world's most influential white people. But according to Donald Trump, these black people are out to get him because he's white, not because they're Democrats and he's a Republican, not because he is Donald Trump, who has many opponents and enemies, white and non-white, who just don't like Donald Trump. Nope, it's just because he's white. Not only was Donald Trump the first U.S. president, former or sitting, to be federally charged with crimes, but he was also the first sitting U.S. president to be impeached twice, although it wasn't enough to remove him from office. Taking this into account, one must consider the nature of U.S. politics and how these political parties operate. These parties, particularly the Democratic and Republican parties, support their own and would do just about anything to get and maintain an advantage over their opposition. This is the nature of politics, not only in the United States concept, but throughout the world. What has happened here is that there has now been a precedent set for criminally charging presidents. How will this affect future politics? More importantly, how will this affect victims of white supremacy racism? If a wealthy, white, male billionaire former president of one of the world's most powerful and influential empires can be brought to face potential prison time, anyone can get it, right? Does Donald Trump's indictment fit the racist strategy of racial white sacrifice confusion? Does this indictment lead non-white people to believe that white supremacy does not exist or that racism is not a serious problem, except for the few who have chosen to make it so? So when the next indictments begin to disproportionately affect non-white people, in other words, when white people start using the precedent to remove from office non-white government officials, non-white people will be too confused to even notice. Racists can always say, it's not racism. Donald Trump was indicted, and he's white. All the while, they're taking out non-white officials from either political party. Trump is not the first U.S. official to be indicted. There have been officials indicted, with many being convicted and even serving prison time, every presidency going back over 100 years. But if what is considered to be the highest office in government can't be used as a shield, as it has been in the past, no one is safe. Nixon resigned before he could be impeached over illegal wiretapping. Clinton struck a deal to avoid being prosecuted for perjury over his lies about his extramarital affair with Monica Lewinsky. But Donald Trump is facing prison time over allegedly falsifying documents related to his own scandals. Does this mean the system of white supremacy doesn't exist? Well, can all of this happen and there still exists a system where those who classify themselves as white dominate and subjugate those they have classified as not white? I wonder which non-white people will be next. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee has been getting on white people's nerves with her attempts to hold white supremacists accountable with laws against lynching and other hate crimes committed by suspected and admitted white supremacists. They could always trump up some charges against her. Maybe use something that almost everyone is doing but is still considered illegal. And in case you missed it, Tennessee State House just expelled Representatives Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, black males, victims of racism, supposedly for protesting in favor of gun ban legislation, while a third representative, Gloria Johnson, a white woman, was allowed to remain in office. Now, both Justin Jones and Justin Pearson have been reinstated, but I think the point has been made. That's the legislative branches on the federal and state level. On the judicial branch, we can look at the attempts to get Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, victim of racism, removed or resigned from office. Thomas is suspected of possibly committing a crime by not reporting certain benefits he has received while serving on the Supreme Court. Now, do you really think Thomas is the only one who has accepted vacation trips from supporters or other personal benefits? There has been a push to have the U.S. Supreme Court enact some sort of updated ethics code that would make reporting these types of gifts mandatory. Of course, the Supreme Court denied the call to establish more rules governing them, which resulted in the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee looking to hold hearings, all for Clarence Thomas, as if he's the only one who is or has accepted these sort of gifts. Question: do you think that those white people surrounding Clarence Thomas, such as his wife and his so-called dear white friend who gave him some of these gifts, should do a better job of using their white power to protect Mr. Thomas? I'd just like to point out that Clarence Thomas, no matter how much I may disagree with him, is, more than anything else, a victim of racism, white supremacy. But I digress. With these removals and attempted removals going on, confusion about the system of white supremacy, racism, can lead victims of racism to mistakenly conclude that racism doesn't exist, especially when suspected racists and their victims can point and say, they got Trump and he was the president. But isn't that how racial white sacrifice confusion works? What does the code suggest VORs should do to counter racial white sacrifice confusion? Among other things, the code suggests that non-white people do not think, speak, or act as if you believe that the system of white supremacy racism has ended because, from time to time, you see many white people in need of adequate shelter, food, medicine, money, etc. The code also suggests to be willing to give constructive help to those who you are able to help, but at the same time, continue to work and learn to make yourself as self-sufficient as you possibly can. Continue to work and plan for your future constructive goals. The code advises being aware that white supremacists often present themselves as being helpless by deliberately placing themselves in situations where they will experience great harm, and that this tactic is ultimately utilized in order to improve the manner in which the system of white supremacy, racism, is maintained, expanded, and or refined. So, what are your thoughts on the racist strategy of racial white sacrifice confusion? Does this strategy play a role in the indictments of former President Donald Trump? What fallouts can be expected as a result of these unprecedented presidential indictments? Feel free to leave your questions, comments, and concerns. For more information about the purpose and goals of this channel, as well as some basic definitions of words and terms we use in reference to our work, I have included a link below to a video containing this information. If you would like an even better understanding of the code and how it works, please visit producejustice.com to order the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. There are many constructive suggestions for ending the system of white supremacy, and Mr. Fuller's code book and his word guide act as guides to getting and keeping on code. If you feel this content is constructive and worth your time and energy, please subscribe and share to support the making of more content in the future. Much appreciation for all the VORs already subscribed. I am JustaVOR, and I am still learning. Thank you for watching. Until next time.
Let me say something that gets to the very crux of the matter, and this may be offensive for some to hear who are not on the side that we're on. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
Say that again.
Let me say it one more time for those of you who didn't hear me. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.